You call yourself a pharaoh? You don't even know how to use your power. So destiny has chosen me to take the power of the pharaoh away from you, and then destroy you.
That ancient power is not yours to take, Merrick.
You tell him! No way is he getting his hands on your power!
I just did.
Okay.
Greetings once again, my friends, and welcome back to Geek News Anime Night, where we talk about a particular series or a particular arc, and we analyze it episode by episode. In this case, with Yu-Gi-Oh! Battle City, and we analyze the duels. I am your host, Adam Mickelson, aka Drac. I hope everybody's having an awesome day or night when you're listening to this, and joining me is my usual panel of fellow geeks, fellow awesome guys in general, and let me go ahead and introduce them. But first, Brenton, I hate to do this to you, but we actually do have a dress code on this podcast, and the fact that you are decked out head to foot in earrings and nose rings and lip rings, you might have to restrict that to like just 3 earrings, 1 nose ring, and maybe 2 lip rings. Are you okay with that?
I'm always constantly amazed by how well you prepare for these introductions.
My brain comes up with weird shit all the time. Alex can attest.
It's just impressive. I applaud you. Also, no, to answer your question.
Oh darn! Well, I guess I'm gonna have to amend the dress code. But first of all, but before I do that, I have to introduce Shadow, the executive producer. I guess that wouldn't actually be accurate because I would be the executive producer, but we'll go with that, right?
Okay, yeah, we'll go with that.
You are the Shadow Blazer, the executive producer. We had to make that joke, and we'll probably make it when Slifer debuts again. But today we're talking Yugi versus Strings, the Quiet One. So this was the next Yugi duel, and actually an important one because it introduces the second Egyptian god card. And so at that point, the dual breakdown here is we have Yugi's deck, which is a spellcaster warrior deck, up against Strings the Quiet One, which is a deck literally built to support Slifer the Sky Dragon via a 5-card combination that doesn't work as well as Merrick thinks it does, but we'll get into that when we get there. So I guess the makeup of monsters would be fiends and slimes.
Delicious.
Yummy, right? So actually this is something that we're going to have to get used to with Merrick's actual deck, because Merrick's actual deck does rely on plasma monsters as well, or slime monsters, as well as to some degree fiends. So at that point, this is kind of an interesting peek into Merrick's deck because similar cards will be used. So at that point, really quick, just a quick, did you like this duel or did you not like this duel from each of you? Let's start with Alex.
Yeah, I liked it, but I liked it more once Slifer did come out because the beginning felt like a pretty standard duel. I get it; it's also there to set up his kind of I don't know what.
That first episode was basically nothing but trying to build the hype engine.
Yeah, to build the hype and to kind of set up Merrick's initial strategy of having that slime shield to constantly deflect Yugi's attacks, absorb Yugi's attacks there. So
yeah, because you got to set up the 5-card strat first, and then summon Slifer. So then at that point, it was unstoppable.
Yeah, credit is due. I think it is a good setup. I just think it's like maybe a little too long. But otherwise, once I
actually did have this thought while I was watching it. Is this first episode feeling like the PlayStation E3 conference to Alex just a little bit? Like they're going too much into their financials, and then they get to the main event.
Yeah.
The first episode, I kind of agree with you. I think it's kind of unnecessary. It's just building hype, but okay, whatever. Brenton, like or dislike?
I also really enjoyed this duel, because of all the same reasons that you guys have essentially laid out. Once once they all stopped jerking each other off and actually got to the game, and with Slifer finally being
There are
put
points
into
in this
play.
duel where everybody there is kind of a little bit of a whose penis is bigger contest, isn't there? There really is.
Yeah, like oh my gosh. I mean, truly though, I mean, the duel was fantastic once they stopped. Well, I mean, the whose penis is bigger motif was still overly
Oh
present.
yes.
However, once Slifer was put into play, it's like, okay, now things are moving along.
Is it just me, or like if okay, I'll have thoughts on Merrick later, but I want to ask you guys seriously. Is it just me, or did they literally make Merrick out to be, and I mean the English dub writers, they literally made him out to be like that one kid who thinks they're absolutely just rockstars at Halo, and then they have the friend come over and absolutely kick their ass, and they just can't comprehend how that happened?
He does give
idea.
off that kind of energy, yeah.
Yeah, no.
I thought that's more Kaiba. That sounds a little more like Kaiba to me, but if you say so.
Well, Kaiba can back it up, but Merrick right now, he okay, he does back it up a little bit in this duel, but there are just a couple of points. The way that he talks is just like, you are way overhyping yourself at this point, considering, you know, all of the criticisms that we've made of you up until now. And technically this isn't even like, it's Merrick controlling strings, and so we're still kind of in that whole Yugi's only facing mind slaves. So at that point, yeah, we still kind of have that issue. I like this duel, and actually the main reason is watching it this time around actually got my creative juices flowing, as it were, because it actually made me start to ask legitimate questions about character directions in this particular duel, because I'm not saying that they didn't make sense. I'm saying that, wow, wouldn't it have been cool if they had literally written just a tiny detail differently, and we would have gone sprawling into another direction. And I'll explain a little bit what the deeper we get into it. But the first thing that I want to do here, usually we can kind of go into a background of who Strings is, because we've done that with Weevil and we've done that with Esperoba, the little that we did know. But here's the thing. According to the English dub, virtually nothing is known about Strings, because all we know is that he is a mind slave that is waiting around in a random area and is portraying himself as a mime. It doesn't really tell us anything about Strings as a character. And so I actually decided to go look up and see if there was any kind of origin written for Strings in the manga or something like that. And turns out there actually was. So
Wow.
I actually want to share this with you guys because it is fairly interesting.
Please do.
So this is in his biography from the Yu-Gi-Oh fandom wiki. Strings was a mime that went mad after killing his parents and sealed his own conscience away out of guilt. Eventually, he came into Merrick's mind control, and due to his crushed mind, became very easy for Merrick to bend to his will. And Merrick basically programmed Strings to make the Slifer deck and then go combat Yugi. I kind of wish this was shown in some way or another. I get it, killing parents. There's no way 4 kids would have allowed that, but I kind of want this backstory shown just to show what Strings is, ultimately. Am I wrong?
I mean, if they were to redo the anime entirely for a more adult audience,
Yeah.
I think that would be like truly stick to the manga. That would be awesome. Otherwise, nah, I agree with you, Adam. Something like that is probably just a tad bit too not okay
Oh yeah,
for
totally.
a
4
children's
kids would have
program.
hated this. And would never have put it on. But like, I was watching the duel and I'm like, what do we know about Strings? And then my mind basically started going, well, man, wouldn't it have been cool if he had the origin of like, he was just like some thief and he somehow ended up with Slifer, and Merrick found him eventually, and Merrick just basically said, screw you, I'm not even dueling you. Boom, I control your mind. I basically lobotomize you, and now I have an Egyptian god card. Uh, to me, that just like, wow, Merrick would be a badass villain if that was actually what happened. And then I'm like, oh, I'm gonna go Google the origin, and the origin's actually really good. I kind of wish that we would have seen this in the series, but I guess if you really want to know it, guys, you have to go to the manga. And I guess the way that they reveal it is during, I think it was the duel with Mai, where you remember how the memories get erased, and
Mhm.
the first one I think was Arcana, and then the second one was Strings, and apparently that's, I guess, when we learn Strings' backstory. It's like,
Gotcha.
dude, that would have been cool in the dialogue. Like, say how I'm not saying you have to say he killed his parents or whatever. You could just mention that he's like a wandering assassin or something, and I'd be like, wow, you added background to a character that didn't really have any. That's kind of
Yeah,
cool.
no, I agree. Like, 4 Kids could have definitely have rewritten something. It's
Yeah,
not like
yeah.
they haven't done it before.
I mean, I get that some people would be like, oh, look, Merrick's monologuing again, but like when you're writing a story, like even the tiniest character to a writer has a backstory, and so it's actually kind of always fun to figure out what those are. So I did want to bring that up, but yeah, it is Strings the Quiet One. He is basically just 100% mind slave, which I actually thought was a really cool concept in a way, because it basically shows like what eventually can happen with Merrick's mind slaves. Is like he takes control enough times, he just destroys your mind. And at that point, you just work for him. You don't do anything else. You will literally sit in the park with birds on you until Master Merrick calls you. And I thought that was actually really, really intimidating as a villain. In Merrick's case, not Strings. Like, Strings is already a vegetable at this point. So I did like that concept, but yes, this is the introduction of Slifer the Sky Dragon, or in the Japanese translation, Saint Dragon, God of Osiris. And I kind of wish they would have kept the Osiris part in the English translation. That would have been ideal, because then it, like Obelisk, Ra, and then Slifer. Slifer's not really Egyptian themed. I'm just saying.
You make a good point there. That honestly did not occur to me until right this
Yeah,
second.
no, I'm just pointing it out right now. Now in terms of the duel itself, I have to be honest here. There was a little bit of dual writing here, or basically trying to embellish a little bit of Duelist Kingdom. But correct me if I'm wrong, guys, it doesn't really interfere with this duel. Like, I went and looked up the corrections for all this, and we'll bring them up when I get to my notes, but we didn't really feel like Yugi had plot armor, did we?
I always thought he does. Yeah.
Okay. Because at that, like, I literally looked at the situation, I'm like, they actually are setting this up pretty well that Yugi could lose. Especially considering that he, when you consider this, he didn't have any knowledge of the Egyptian god cards. I mean, at least Kaiba had an upper hand because he knew about Obelisk, but Yugi knows nothing about these cards. They basically got mentioned to him, I think, in the Rare Motherfucking Hunter duel, didn't they? Yeah, it wasn't Arcana that they got mentioned to him, but then he gets told that they exist, and he doesn't know jack about it. So that's an interesting one, and I also like the fact that it's not just involving Yugi and Strings. They are kind of showing the Battle City duel, or the Battle City tournament, shaping as it is, because you do get to see spotlights with Joey and his little crew, as well as Kaiba, and Kaiba's quest to find the other god cards, and the fact that he's constantly talking to his staff to see if a god card is being played. So I do like the fact that they showcased an active tournament going on, at least to some extent. What are some of the positives of these episodes that you guys want to mention? And let's start with Brenton this time.
I do appreciate that you're pretty much delegating Q starts, because Alex and I can't seem to figure that out.
That's true.
And with that, I've lost my train of thought. 1 second. Let me. Well, hold on. Let me just jump back onto the train. Things that were done well. I really, really enjoyed I did enjoy the deck that Strings deck. I thought that the way it was built to support Slifer was brilliant because naturally I couldn't really remember how the deck was built. I from when I watched these episodes as a kid,
Right.
and as it progressed and realizing, oh yeah, that's how Yugi wins it all, and seeing it all come into play, um, was super super fun. I thought additionally that the although the buildup was a bit boring,
Right. Yeah, the hype engine was very strong here.
yeah, um,
I was almost waiting for Bobby Kotick to come out and start advertising Call of Duty.
stop it. Um, uh, although the buildup was nauseating, everything that followed was just really, really, really well done.
Mhm.
Yes, yes, Strings didn't really have to do a whole lot per se in terms of making moves because he was all set up for success. I just really loved how, even though the inner monologue was for Yugi was, this is it for me, he still in some capacity remained cool and collected and relied on the heart of the cards, aka plot armor, to get him to his victory. And I thought that out of all the duels that he has participated in so far and has been challenged to do, that this really pushed him
Yeah.
as a duelist and really pushed him to think out his strategies, think out his next move, and think several steps ahead so that he could get the victory that he won.
I tend to agree with that because like with the rare hunter, you could say that he was challenged mainly because of time limit. It was just a matter of time before Exodia was going to be drawn. I would almost argue that Arcana kind of wasn't a challenge for him because he was basically fighting a deck that was similar to his in terms of support for spellcasters. But this is the one that actually did challenge him because it gave him a card he didn't know about. And even though in the actual trading card game, a lot of these cards are common in the Labyrinth of Nightmare that they came out in, they are considered to be these uber rare cards that it almost looks like Yugi, at least kid Yugi, has never seen them before. Because like you have moments like with Card of Safe Return where Yugi was like, "What? There's actually a card that does this." And then also the reveal of infinite cards when he's like, oh, I thought I had an advantage here, but I guess I don't. So it actually kind of showed like maybe Yugi doesn't know every single card out there, and there are rare ones that he's never even seen. Do you agree with that, Alex?
Yeah, I do
Was this a
agree.
challenging duel for Yugi?
Yeah, because it really took him a while to find a way around Merrick's strategy. And that would I say be my favorite part of the episode is when Yuki feels like he's on the ropes, he doesn't know what else to do. He finally figures out a way to exploit Slifer's own abilities.
Yes. He doesn't explain it very well, but yeah, and I think also the other thing to point out is like when you take a look at the god cards, like I say that Kaiba has an advantage because he knows how Obelisk works, but Obelisk is kind of the vanilla god card. It's very simplistic in what it does. And so the first god card that Yugi comes across actually does have lots of conditions that have to be met. And so I think that actually speaks well to Yugi because, you know, he was dealing with kind of the mid god card, and that god card had a lot of things to pay attention to.
Yeah.
What are some other positives, Brinton?
Well, on going, riding that wave that you just
Mhm.
started, honestly, Yuki's incredible ability to adapt to that situation
Right.
when confronted with a card that he knows nothing about and just having to figure out, okay, like obviously I'm not going to be able to take it down by any normal means. So how can I, what can I do here?
Right.
And if and honestly, if it wasn't for Merrick literally explaining how his 5 card combo happened at every single opportunity that he was given to talk about those freaking 5 cards, then I don't think Yugi would have arrived to the exploitation of that combination as quickly as he
No,
did.
he technically came to that conclusion after Kaiba. So
Yeah, and I mean, and on top of that, as much as Kaiba is just a giant jackass, you can't
he's such a
deny the
lovable
fact
giant jackass, isn't he?
you can't deny that that he is super intelligent,
Right.
because he heard Merrick say what that 5 card combo does once, and he was like, "Oh, I know exactly what I would do." Now,
Exactly.
what is
But
is
but
Yugi gonna figure it out?
to also kind of point out to that, they didn't make Seto look immortal because it took him a minute to figure it out. Because you had the little monologue going on with Mokuba, and then he's like, "Oh wait, that's it. Like I figured it out." And then he gives the hint to Yugi, and Yugi figures it out. So I do like the fact that they didn't just say like, "Oh, Kaiba's this dueling prodigy." No, he had to actually figure it out.
Yeah,
And the funniest thing is that it happened so fast. As kids, we probably never noticed it, but as adults, I'm like, "Oh shit, yeah, they did actually explain what they had to do, didn't they? That was like fleeting seconds." So I kind of like that little detail. But yeah, continue, Brinson.
no, that's that's just what I that's just what I wanted to add to what
Hmm.
you've already mentioned.
Okay, so other positives for this. Let's go with Alex this time.
Uh, not sure. I think that's kind of it for me. I think again the best part is just all the moments with once Slifer is on the battlefield.
Hmm. One
I
go ahead,
oh
Brinson.
I was just gonna say, when Slifer was finally summoned, just the way the animators took care to really make it a big deal, like to the point where as Merrick is still approaching Battle
Yes,
City and he sees the sky darkening, I thought
that
that was
was
a
actually
really,
kind of
really
cool
neat.
how the thunder was following his boat. That was
Yeah,
kind of
like
cool.
it was a really nice touch, because it made the fact that an Egyptian guard card was being summoned,
Right.
and it made it a really. I just loved how they made it a really big deal, and it's Slifer, and it still was a huge deal.
What's funny is like what's funny is too, this isn't even like the most epic time Slifer gets summoned in Battle City. Like I would definitely say later on we get way better summoning sequences that involve this exact same stuff, but just different circumstances paint a whole different picture, and they're all great. But I just love the fact that when Obelisk comes out, it just kind of darkens the sky, and all he does is kind of loom over you. But they always have to do this big, elaborate entrance for both Slifer as well as Raw to an extent. Because with Raw, it involves like a blinding light instead. And so he's got his own kind of unique thing that he does, but we will always get this unique thunderstorm that's happening when Slifer gets summoned. So I will add a positive here in regards to strings. It's been a while since I actually kind of paid attention to Strings as a character when rewatching this duel, and it actually kind of occurred to me just how gaunt, how thin and malnourished he looked. And I thought that really worked towards he just he's just a mind slave. He's just a vegetable that can only be ever controlled by Merrick. Like he doesn't eat, he doesn't sleep or anything. Like you could definitely tell with his eyes. Like I've got an image of him right now. Like you could almost make the argument that he doesn't even have eyelids anymore. He's just this basically dried up husk that Merrick can take over from time to time. And I thought that actually played really well for Merrick as a villain, because like it makes you just kind of imagine like what dark dungeon does Strings get kept in before he's unleashed on a duel monsters tournament, right? Like he's
Yeah,
just randomly somewhere, and he's not allowed to eat, and he's not allowed to sleep. He's not allowed to do any of that stuff until Merrick takes over. And guess what? Merrick is not going to be uh, taking control of your mind to go give you a steak dinner, is all I'm saying. So I think that the way that they portrayed the other thing too that I also think plays into this is when he's not playing cards, Strings' arms, dual disc included, are just scraping on the ground. Like, we are using the absolute minimum of Strings' body because of how weak it is, and the only time you ever see anything change out of his posture is when he's playing a card. So I really like that. I think that they did a great job with showcasing what Strings is and what he means to Merrick, which is very little. Like, he's basically just a second deck that he can put another guard card into. Any other positives that either one of you want to put out there?
Nothing for me.
Okay.
Yeah, those are that's everything for me.
Okay, so then before we get into notes, was there anything negative about this duel that you didn't like? That, like, certain points of plot armor or things like that that didn't sit well with you? Alex, why don't you go first?
The Even though it became a fun Achilles heel in the end, the card of some of the cards seem kind of broken, like the infinite draw card.
I'll tell you the very least, they're not being used right. But
Of course they're not, because
we'll
this
give those.
anime never uses the cards correctly.
No. And also the other thing too is, like, these cards weren't officially in circulation yet, so they had not. The way that I think I understand it is they knew the cards existed because of the manga, but they didn't necessarily, like, the people who made the trading card game hadn't figured out their effects in the actual trading card game, and so a lot of these monsters didn't have those effects, or at least the animators and the writers were not aware of those effects.
That makes sense.
Because the one that I'll bring up later was one that they didn't know, which was Revival Jam. Because they had to change that up real quick to balance it out. Otherwise, like, people would have nothing but Revival Jam in their decks. If Revival Jam worked the way it did in this duel, nobody would have any other monsters in their deck. It would basically just be a drawing battle until you got to Revival Jam, and then you never lose.
Yeah, seriously.
So at that point, I will say that, that plot armor, that 5-card combination wasn't as great as Merrick made it out to be, even though, like, in terms of performance, it did seem imposing. Brinton, any negatives for this duel for you?
For me, my negatives really are just more, and I mean for those who are listening, I think it's I think it would be fun to mention that all three of us may have watched these episodes today prior to recording.
Totally not.
But essentially, I was skipping, like, again, because we talk primarily about the duel, and most other things or at least most other things I ignore. That was me more so than ever, because I was just like, oh my gosh, the exposition and the need for freaking Merrick. And I wish I normally I tally stuff like this just to make fun of it. It felt like he said at least a dozen of times, "This is it for you, Pharaoh. You're about to lose, Pharaoh.
I kind
Give
of
up, Pharaoh."
like, whenever Merrick duels, I want to, like, have a counter of how many times he says Pharaoh.
Oh my gosh, I almost want to go back. I almost
Don't
want
make
to go
that a
back to
drinking
the very
game. People
beginning.
will die.
I almost want to go back to the very beginning just so that I could, like, tally from, like, Bandit Keith to where we presently are.
All
But
the
I'm
way
not
through
sure.
Battle City, it would end up in the tens of thousands, probably.
Well, I mean, I'm, like, semi-committed to doing that. However, since I am literally starting school in a couple of weeks, I don't think I have the time to go back and rewatch stuff.
Right.
So I'm not. Ultimately, it was just annoying.
Right.
Like, he had to have said it at least a dozen or more times, and I was just like, we get it already. You don't like him.
I mean,
stop.
I was actually saying with him whenever he said the power of the Pharaoh, because he says it so much, and it got old fairly fast. So I started repeating it with him.
It really did get so old, and it's just like,
Yeah.
It made me think of when, like, this one line in the Joey versus Weevil duel, where Weevil is just like, he says something to him about like his insect queen um gonna like annihilate him, and Joey's only response is whatever. Like
Whatever. Yeah.
I got to this point where I was like, oh my god, whatever, dude, just freaking make your move. Like
Right.
like he was just goading on him the entire time, and I'm like, this is really enough. Like I'm like, no more, please.
Mhm.
We get it.
I totally agree. My major problem with this is that with this duel in particular is, if I were going to change this out, first of all, I would have made it a two-part duel, because like you guys were saying, the hype train was very strong in the first episode, probably stronger than it needed to be for this, because they already had been hyping up Strings the Quiet One before this, and we did know that just because whenever Slifer would be talked about by Merrick, that Strings would then be shown. So we're like, okay, well, this guy obviously has Slifer. So at that point, they already kind of had that hype built up. But also, this is one of the worst examples of monologuing in duels. Like, I've made the joke before of like, before I draw a card, I have to tell you my entire life story. I was born on January 10th, and it was stormy that day, and it snowed endlessly. And before I was even able to come out of the womb, a pizza delivery man came to the door and helped deliver me. Yeah, like that. I'm literally making this up off the cuff right now, but that's how silly this is. Is like, we are constantly bouncing back to various bits of lore that we already know. Like if I was gonna go in with a razor and just start cutting things, I'll tell you a couple of things I would cut. One would be Ishizu and Bakura. It was like, ultimately was not necessary, and in fact, I ended up laughing at that whole segment, because where I think they were supposed to have, where Ishizu is supposed to be having a mental monologue, they actually are animating lip flaps, and there are people around her that look like tourists. So I'm like, how do they feel that there's this random girl walking around in Egyptian attire who's talking to herself?
Yeah, I totally skipped over that. So
Yeah.
like
Yeah,
I
did too.
I actually forgot that happened, because I was like, I don't care.
Yeah. I would also cut parts of Joey, but not necessarily where he met up with Kaiba, and I'll get to that in a little while, because that moment was kind of precious to me. But I'd cut out a little bit of that, and also maybe I wouldn't have had the scene where Kaiba checks in with the dueling command center. I instead would just, because we all know that he has a command center of cloned women that are looking around for Egyptian god cards. All they needed to do is show his calm button go off, and we know that they're looking for it.
It's just the
Mhm.
Borg of Yu-Gi-Oh. It's fine.
Yeah, exactly. So that's really kind of my issue, because I think you could cut enough stuff out of that where it could easily just have been a two-part duel, and it would have been fine.
Easily. I completely agree with that.
But let's
Definitely.
actually get into our notes here, because in case you guys don't know, at least Brinton and myself do take copious amounts of notes while watching this, and just sometimes it's our inner thoughts on the matter, or things that we question with a character. Brinton, do you want to go first?
Well, I've already expressed most of my thoughts that
Okay.
I would have written down as notes. I like, again, if I actually like took my time to watch these, I'd have better notes. So I'm gonna do better for next week. Otherwise, I've already laid them out for you.
So at that point, this is the part that people love, is as I go into my actual notes, which actually do include the research that I do going into the actual Yu-Gi-Oh! Trading card game effects of these monsters, because we basically play the additional game of how many times they don't follow the trading card game rules, and at that point, if they hit 3 strikes, they're out of here. So at that point, let's go ahead and start with this thought happened to me every single time they would do that pan away to Merrick on the boat, where he's like, for some reason, looking very casual while he's controlling strings. You'd think you'd have to like seal yourself off in a quiet room to go do that. but he's literally pulling a Titanic. And I kept having this thought. Wouldn't it be funny if Merrick just fell off the boat while controlling strings talking to Yugi?
That would be hilarious.
Like, I literally imagined this in my head. It was just like, and now I'm totally owning you. I was like, I need this now. I needed this in Little Karibo's dub. I need it. I mean, maybe he did it. I don't know. I'll have to go watch again. But I mean, for crying out loud, like, he was literally, I'm the king of the world. And I was like, dude, there has to be wind coming against you, especially when that thunderstorm was rolling in. It's probably not a good idea to be on the end of the boat. But all right. And then I have to bring this up because this still bugs me. Seriously, where is the jacket to cape button on Yugi's jacket? Like, I don't know how he does it. Does it just fold in on itself and then it just becomes a cape for the pharaoh? I need to know where the button is because it doesn't make sense. Because, like, I get that they throw it around his back, but it's like, okay, where does it attach? Otherwise, that thing's just gonna fall.
I'll be honest, I don't really think of too much about it.
It kind of bugs me just a little bit. But, you know, it's a minute detail, so I'll give it that. I also love this dub dialogue between Yugi and the Pharaoh. When Strings introduces himself, the Pharaoh's like, "You're not getting my puzzle, Merrick!" And Yugi's like, "You tell him, buddy!" "I just did." "Oh. Okay then."
Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
Dude! This is like awareness, like this is fourth wall breaking levels of like Digimon potential right here, where like he's literally like doing this, he's saying, "You tell him, dude." "I just did, Yugi." I loved it. I thought I was in a Digimon episode for a while there. And then I also mentioned String's gaunt look just looks kind of off-putting. It looks very... it kind of showcases that he's just this mind slave that is not able to take care of himself at all. This was an honest question that I had during this duel. So this is like the first turn where Merrick... I'm not going to say Strings the entire time because it's not Strings in charge. But Merrick basically fused a monster together, and by Battle City rules, he can't attack in that turn. But then he decides to don the Quick Attack Magic card. And I literally looked at that, and I'm like, does anybody have any reason to have this card in their deck unless they're a fusion deck? Because this is kind of unnecessary for anything else. Am I the only one that thought that?
I guess so.
Yeah, I didn't really think about that. If I'm honest,
weird about that. But the funniest thing is that we're gonna learn later that both Yugi and Kaiba have quick attack as well, and they only ever use them when, you know, obviously because when a fusion monster is out, and they try to dodge that rule. So I think it only. I actually thought the card didn't exist, and then I went and looked it up, and no, it is actually in the TCG. So, no, Merrick, Revival Jam isn't the perfect defense. I'm gonna go ahead and go to the actual card, to be able to explain this. Revival Jam doesn't work the way that Merrick said. If it did, it would be the most broke as fuck card in the game. Because basically a monster that revives itself whenever it is attacked, that's a tad broken, is it not?
Yeah.
So here's how the card actually works. So when the monster is destroyed, you can pay 1,000 life points and your next standby phase to bring Revival Jam back. But this is once in that turn for that particular Revival Jam. So at that point, I mean, if you had 3 Revival Jams out on the field, maybe it is a perfect defense, but at the cost of having to pay 3,000 life points to bring all of those back. So there is a drawback to Revival Jam, and it's not the perfect defense. And in fact, if we were playing by actual rules, Strings would have lost way earlier because all Yugi would have to do is constantly attack Revival Jam and deplete his life points that way. Well, actually, no, yeah, because he'd have to pay 1,000 life points. So it literally would have taken 4 turns to wipe him out. So we have our first foul of the duel. And this is me actually pointing this out. Merrick needs to pay 1,000 life points each time Revival Jam is destroyed to bring it back. So yeah, he has to pay 1,000 life points to bring Revival Jam back. So it's not the perfect defense. So then I also got into a random thought of apparently Mokuba has obtained caddy trading because he's the one that carries around the metal briefcase now, not Kaiba. I don't know why, because it looks like it's fucking heavy, whereas like Kaiba can actually hold it. And it actually looks like it's am I wrong? But does it look like it's about 75% of Mokuba's body size? That metal briefcase is fucking huge.
Yeah, probably.
It's big enough to have a butt ton of Duel Monsters cards and a laptop in there and still act like a nuclear football and have a network connection. Yeah, this thing's fucking huge. So we have our second foul. So technically, the card Jam Breeding Machine doesn't work the way that Merrick explained it. So this is about the time where he gets his third slime token from Jam Breeding Machine and can summon Slifer in the same turn. That's not how that works. Jam Breeding Machine technically counts as your summon for that turn. And here's why. Because the way that Jam Breeding Machine actually works is during each of your standby phases, and technically in the TCG, you get 2 in your turn. You can summon 2 slime tokens each time. But the way that you get away with that is that you can't summon an actual monster. That's the balanced way to be able to handle that. So technically, Merrick would have had to wait an extra turn to summon Slifer. He would not be able to do that in the same turn. And here's yet another foul. The jam breeding can't be sacrificed. So this was so dumb. Not only did he sacrifice the slime tokens, he sacrificed the magic card. That's not how that works, Merrick. So technically,
I didn't even realize that.
I only know it because I faced off against Strings and Merrick in the games, and Jam Breeding Machine stays on the field. It's actually an interesting way to be able to win the duel if you don't want to have to deal with their nastier cards, because these tokens are 500, 500, so they're basically life point attacks, because each time they're summoned, they have to be put in attack position. So you have to take the next turn to turn them into defense. So they're essentially a life point attack, because they're so low. We have yet another foul. So technically, Slifer's type is Divine Beast. So when Yugi was saying that Buster Blader gains an extra 500 points for every dragon on the field, he would not have gained that from Slifer, because there is actually a typing, and it has existed when the god cards themselves actually did release in the TCG. They are divine beasts, so he would not have gotten that advantage. Sorry, Yugi, he's still 2600. And then I had an ADD moment in the middle of this fight, because this was probably one of those points where we had the power of the Pharaoh! So, ADD moment. If Merrick knows the secrets of the Pharaoh and has read all of the ancient scriptures, wouldn't that mean that he'd actually know the Pharaoh's actual name?
I think he does call him Yami at least once.
That's not his name.
Oh, yeah, I guess not.
Because we don't find out the Pharaoh's true name until the end of it. But, I mean, we're talking about the Tomb Keepers clan, who have kept, like, they've kept the tomb of the Pharaoh safe for millennia, and they have all these ancient scriptures that they can teach to everybody. Wouldn't you put the name of the Pharaoh in those scriptures so that maybe you could praise him, or when he actually came to the world again, you would know his name so you could call him out?
Maybe. I don't know.
Did I just call a plot hole that nobody ever thought of? Like,
I guess so.
Merrick should have known what his name was. Instead of calling him Yami the entire time, he should have been calling him Atem. So the next one that I have is I completely forgot. How did Joey do in I forgot. How did Joey do in Duelist Kingdom again?
Runner up.
Right.
Yeah, how many times have they repeated it in Battle City? Yeah, that's why I said quick. I forgot. How did he do in Duelist Kingdom again? Oh, second place. Got it. Then you guys will appreciate this. This is when Kaiba sees that Joey actually has a dual disc. You know Kaiba is screaming in his head when he found Joey with a dual disc. Like, in his head, it's like that Team 4-star moment where they cut to Trunks' head going, "Ah!" And he's just got that blank stare on his face.
Yeah.
Oh, that was just great. And I now need little Karibo to animate this. This would be amazing. We have our next foul. Magic Cylinder does not have to be used with a Magician card, which is what Yugi said. He had to pair it with the Dark Magician Girl in order to use it. But that also brings up the next foul, because this is actually a goof on Merrick's and Yugi's part. Here's how Slifer works, in case people don't know. So, obviously, 1,000 attack points and defense points for every card you have in your hand. But here's where it gets complicated. The second mouth attack. And this is actually in a lot of cases where I've talked to a lot of people who are like, I would love to have an Egyptian god card in my deck, but I only want to put an obelisk because he is so simple. Here's how the second mouth attack works. When a monster is summoned onto your opponent's side of the field, Slifer will then attack it with the second mouth, or however many are summoned, and it will deal 2,000 damage to that monster. So, if your monster is below that, or at 2,000, they will die. They will be destroyed. But, as we saw with Buster Blader and Big Shield Gardna, if they go above 2,000, then you just lose 2,000 attack or defense points from it. And here's where they kind of effed up. In the previous turn, people remember that Dark Magician Girl was summoned, Dark Magician Waifu was summoned by sacrificing Karibo. Slifer never attacked Karibo. Did anybody notice that?
I missed that. No, I didn't
Yeah,
notice.
the second mouth, it's not Merrick's choice on whether or not it activates. It activates. So, technically, he wouldn't have been able to summon Dark Magician Girl anyway, because Karibo wouldn't be there. Because it would have been destroyed.
That's a really good point.
Yeah. So we're gonna technically count that as a foul on both of their sides. Because Merrick wasn't using the second mouth right, and Yugi technically couldn't have summoned Dark Magician Girl. Sorry, Dark Magician Waifu. Then we have our final foul of the day in this duel. Spellbinding Circle is a continuous trap card that only expires when it is either canceled out by a magic card or a trap card, or the targeted monster is destroyed. That is the only way that it would ever be affected. Now, I just barely thought about this, but magic and trap cards aren't supposed to work on Egyptian god cards for more than one turn. So maybe this gets justified in there, but just not properly explained in the duel. But that's how it works, and also it does not remove 700 points. So that wouldn't have affected his totals. He would just be frozen, and he couldn't attack. But I guess after the next turn, it would have been pointless anyway, because being he's a divine beast, it would have nullified that. I have to go look that up now. Then the next thing that I have to point it out, this is when the loop started happening, the infinite time loop where Slifer basically destroyed itself. Behold, Slifer's ultimate weakness, thinking with portals.
Yeah.
That's basically what this was. This was a forever dive in Portal. So it was a good thing that Yugi played Portal the previous day.
That's a very good thing.
Yeah,
Oh my
it's a very good
gosh.
thing, actually. What was that?
I said, "Oh my gosh."
me and Alex have a love for Portal. If there's ever a Portal 3, I think both of us were going to squee in happiness.
I mean, it's a good game.
Yeah,
so
no,
I
it
don't blame
absolutely
you.
is. It almost makes me want to play Half-Life just to see the Portal references in it. So the next thing that I pointed out is it was great how they reasserted Merrick's dominance as a villain. And the reason I say this is because, yes, Merrick lost, but then Merrick points out the real threat that now exists is his boat is docking in Battle City, in the city of Domino. So he basically points out, you think you've won, but I'm now in this city to conquer it, and everywhere there are potential mind slaves for me to take over. And this is the point where he teases Yami about taking over Joey or taking over Taya, which I thought was brilliant. I think that was actually the way to be able to do it, is like, yes, he loses, so that should take him down a peg, but then you bring him back up 2 other pegs, because now he's saying, oh yeah, now I'm here, which means I'm even more dangerous to you. Like, you can literally trust nobody in this city because I can control them. And even better, I don't know if you noticed this, guys, but when he was making this monologue, they actually show him controlling multiple mind slaves at once. Now, technically, that's not how the Millennium Item works, but, like, that's frightening, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like, that showcases what he can do.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I thought it was a really nice way to end off, like, this episode, because, like you're saying, it really has, like, before, yeah, you're the villain, whoop-de-doo, like, you really have your eyes set on this Millennium Puzzle, and now he's in City, and he's made it even more known to the heroes that, like, you all really don't get it.
Yeah, you
like,
don't know how boned you are. I can literally turn this city against you.
Exactly.
So I like the fact that they brought him back up a couple of pegs, because and also to the people who have actually gotten kind of mad at us because we've knocked Merrick down with some of the stupid decisions that got made with the writing. This is something that actually elevates him back up. It definitely doesn't help when we see him in his new outfit, because this is just a personal nitpick of mine, but he just looks more menacing with the robes on. And I don't know why they decided to take that off and put him in like a regular outfit, because he doesn't really need to be out there collecting cards and whatnot. I know why they did it, but he doesn't need to be out there because he has all these potential mind slaves that can just do the work for him. And I think that actually would have been a better direction to go, is like his mind slaves basically come up and give him 6 locator cards and a bunch of new rare cards that maybe he rips up because he's an asshole like that. That would have been better in my opinion, but I'm just pointing that out. I just think he looks better with the robes, because especially since he has kind of that gold imprint of the Millennium Eye on his robe, it looks a lot better. And I want to bring this up to you guys because this actually had me questioning for a little bit. So this was when Kaiba basically says, "Congratulations, you won the duel. Now you and I are gonna face off." And then the monologue happens where Merrick tells Yugi, like, you're just how boned he is. And technically, Yugi didn't say no to the duel right away. He only said it after that monologue happened. But in terms of anime rules, correct me if I'm wrong, both of you, but a competitive glare, does that equal consent in the rules of anime, specifically shonen?
I don't know.
I guess
What
the
are you
argument that I'm
talking
making is,
about?
did Yugi consent to it and then basically forfeit?
Are you saying did Yugi forfeit by running
So
from
if we're
from
saying that
Kaiba?
he accepted Kaiba's challenge with an anime glare and then ran off because he had to go find Joey and all that, do we technically count that as a forfeit? Should he have given Kaiba Slifer and his locator cards? Or at least
Maybe,
one of them?
but I feel like Kaiba would also be the type to like not accept him on
So do
on
I.
default. I think Kaiba would want to win them. I don't think he'd accept a default.
But this is like one of those meta moments where I have no problem saying this, Alex and Brinton. I kind of want to bring Rising Sun into this argument, because it's just like, does a competitive glare from your opponent mean consent in the rules of anime. Because how many times has this happened in a shonen anime, in Dragon Ball, in Naruto, in One Piece, where it isn't actually said, I accept your challenge. Instead, you get a nod. Maybe you'll get a head nod, but most of the time you just get a stare down. I might have broken every anime fan's brains out there, because now you have to think about it.
I do have to think about it.
Does an anime stare mean consent now? And already we know we broke Brenton because Brenton's quiet about this.
I am just so confused.
Oh, are you confused with what I'm presenting, or?
Yes.
What I'm basically saying is, like, okay, Vegeta goes up to Goku and says, let's fight. And Goku, in some cases, doesn't say, like, oh yeah, let's go ahead, bring it on. He instead kind of just sits there, maybe goes, and maybe a head nod, but then he just kind of stares at Vegeta, and then they go off and go do their fight. And so that made me think of, like, okay, well, the way that Yugi was looking at Kaiba, he probably would have accepted the duel. So does that glare mean that he accepted the duel?
Adam, you're literally thinking way too hard on this one.
I'm taking this way too meta.
It might be.
I might bring this up with Rising Sun. I need to have this conversation with him now.
We're all on this boat in this meta ocean that you're
in this conversation too.
And like the waves are crashing around us, and I'm just completely letting it envelop me into the dark depths below.
The walls are crumbling down. Yeah.
Like both of you are trying to reach for my hands, and you're like, "Hold on," and I'm like, "I don't want to."
Do you see what I mean, though? This duel made me think about things creatively for some reason this time around. That I'm like, I didn't think about it that way.
Yeah, Adam, I think you thought a little too hard about this.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, probably. I mean, I have been getting over a cold a little bit, in case people can't tell with the cough. Maybe I have been thinking about it too much, but now I'm laughing at the sheer level of meta that I have basically construed through my weird insanity. And now, because
bless your heart,
we do live streams, I want to bring this up at the live stream, Alex. I really do. And just ask people honestly, like, ask this question. And in fact, to the people who are listening, leave a comment in the if you're listening on YouTube. I really want to have this discussion with people.
As a side note, I totally forgot that one of my dogs was sitting in the room here with me.
Yeah.
And they just got up, and it scared the shit out of me.
So basically I blew Brenton's mind with meta, and then the dog just, made him actually crap a turd. I love that.
Well, I mean, she looked at me, and then she like got mad at me because she's like, "Why am I in here still?" And it's like, just stop.
I just love the way that you mentioned your opinion on this, Brenton. Like earlier, we were talking about the recent FF14 announcement, and I'm pretty sure that wasn't in your head at all after I brought up this meta conversation.
No, not in the slightest.
No. This is what happens when I watch shit, and Alex can attest to it. This shit happens when I watch things, and then my mind starts percolating. But overall,
that's a good word.
Out of 5, what would we give Yugi versus Strings, the Quiet One?
This would be a 3 out of 5 for me.
Okay, so right down the middle.
Yeah.
So what brought it down to you? Just to give people that aspect.
Just the fact it's unnecessarily 3 episodes long. Yeah. It could have been 2.
Exactly. What about you, Brenton? Out of 5, what would you give? I guess I have to say the name at some point. I think it was Mime Control or Mime Attack.
Mime Control.
Mime Attack.
Yeah.
Did we just literally talk for the last hour and not once mention the name of the episode?
We actually did.
Yeah, we did.
Well, I hate to say it, but like, I mean, if I've got, I think it's either Mime Attack or it's Mime Control, and it's just like,
it's Mime
Control. Cool, you made a mime pun, and it just kind of falls flat a little bit to me. I might be wrong, but to me, it just kind of feels like that. Mime Control, that's what it is. So
I
yeah,
confirmed that like 2 times.
yeah, mind control. Yeah. I think they should have just called it. They should have just called these episodes the Quiet One, because I think that was actually a better introduction for strings. But yes, out of 5, what would you give this, Brinson?
I'm gonna give it a 4. Out of all the duels that we've watched so far, this one I did actually quite enjoy,
Mhm.
regardless of regardless of everything pre Slifer. Um, so that's it. That's my answer.
Did this fix the problems that you had with Arcana? Because there's still stalemates in this duel, but I remember one of the big complaints that you had with Arcana was they had that one big stalemate. Did the stalemates here kind of fix that for you?
Yes, because the stalemates with Arcana were literally just, I'm gonna do this. I'm literally gonna copy you. And it's
Mhm.
like that's boring, but okay.
And instead, in this case, like, we didn't have identical ways that their counterattacks were going. We actually had way different directions. So
Exactly.
I kind of agree on that. For me, I'm gonna stick with Brinton here. I think it's a 4 out of 5. I think there is unnecessary hype, and there are things that kind of drag this down. But considering that this is like the first actually challenging duel for Yugi, and kind of showcases, in my opinion, better than the Rare Hunter, the the sheer amount of like rare cards and what the potential for the Rare Hunters actually is. I think this does it better than either Arcana or Rare Motherfucking Hunter could ever have done. Because obviously, you had this 5-card combination that Merrick has invented around Slifer, and how does he get it? He has to go and get like the rarest cards. And the worst part about it too is like when you see the deck kind of fall apart, he not only has these really rare cards, he has multiples of them. That
Oh
that
yeah,
speaks
that
volumes. I actually want to count them because I think I actually counted 4 cards of safe return. So at that point, technically, that would be another rule break because he can't go past 3. But I think he had 4 of them, if I'm counting it right. So it's just like that. That's kind of effed up. Like these super rare cards, and they have multiples of them. So yeah, ultimately, guys, let us know what you thought of these episodes. Like, ultimately, we're liking it. Let us know what you thought of Yugi versus Strings. I would love to be able to hear from you guys, and thank you guys so much for your continued support of these podcasts. We really love actually doing these. Like, we love doing the monthly podcast, but we actually, if I'm speaking wrong for either of you, go ahead and speak up. But like, we have a lot of fun dissecting these episodes and just pointing out like some of the dumb things that come up. So we really enjoy this. We're happy that you guys enjoy it too. But if you are brand spanking new and listening to this, first of all, welcome. We're happy to have you here. Second, please consider subscribing on YouTube, or you can also subscribe to the Twitch channel, and be able to see some of the other content that we provide. Or you can go to Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Amazon Podcasts, Spotify, and Player.fm to be able to check the podcast out on those podcasting platforms. We are reaching out to some other ones, so stay tuned for those announcements. And that's also going to help us out. Leave us a review, and share it around because it definitely helps us out. And when we come back for the next Battle City Duel, I think we're going to come across, in my opinion, one of Joey's better duels in this, because he's going to be taking on Mako Tsunami. And I actually have a lot of good memories that I want to share about this duel with you guys. But I mean, am I wrong? Like, I think this is actually like a fun duel for Joey, mainly because it doesn't
I
involve
don't
a
remember
cheater.
it, so
yeah.
we'll see.
I mean, when you put together the entire itinerary for this series of the show, and I was reading through everything, some of the only ones that I like, there were a few that I couldn't remember just by name alone, and the one that we're reviewing next week just happens to be one of those. So
Mhm.
I will be watching it with fresh eyes.
Yes. So yeah, when we come back next time, we're going to be taking on Joey versus Mako Tsunami. So we will see you guys then for that. Until then, have a good night or day when you're listening to this. Thank you so much for your support, and we will see you next time. But now it's time for Shadow, the executive producer, to properly exit.
Goodbye.